Today's daf we're going to be learning is Ketubot daf Ayin Aleph. This month's learning is sponsored by Debbie Gvir and her husband Yosi. Thank you to Rabbanit Michelle, Hadran, and the Hadran Zoom community for their kindness, support, and care during a medically challenging year. May you all be zochet to a healthy and happy Tafshin Pei Gimel. Okay, we're going to get started with where we ended off yesterday, kind of in the middle. We were talking about a case where Rabbi Yosi, there was a case where someone had forbidden someone to benefit from them, and then ended up the two of them were alone in a place, and the other person didn't have any food, and they wanted to give them food. So the solution they came up with in the Braita was he can put the food, or she could put the food on a rock or on a fence and say, this is open to anybody who wants to take it, and basically making it hefker, ownerless, and then the other person will be able to take the food because it's no longer theirs. To which Rabbi Yosi said, no, that doesn't work. So Rava wants to explain why did Rabbi Yosi say this. Amar Rava, last few words on Ayin Amud Bet. My time at Rabbi Yosi, Gzera mishum ma'aseh de Beit Choram. There was a case of Beit Choram where there was a excuse me, there was a father who was forbidden to the son who forbade his father to get benefit from him, and then the son had a wedding for his son and wanted to invite the father. So what did he do? He said, my courtyard and my food, my meal, is all going, I'm going to give it to a friend. He goes to the friend, he says, I'm giving this to you as a gift. So when he says, I'm giving this to you as a gift, the friend was like, what, is this legit? Not legit? Is this real? So he says to him, okay, if you're giving it to me as a gift, I'm going to sanctify it to the temple. Okay. Why exactly did this? Anyway, I don't want to get into all the details of the story, but he basically says, I'm going to sanctify it to the temple, kind of to see, is this real or not? And some people say because he didn't really want the father to break the vow if it wasn't really real, right? So it just seemed a little fishy to him. So the guy says, wait a minute, I'm not giving it to you as a gift so that you could sanctify it to the temple, right? Meaning, I'm not really giving it to you as a gift. This is fictitious. So, right, that we're coming up on Sukkot, right? People give on the first day, you have to own your lulav and etrog. So some people pass it on as a gift, with the intention you're going to return it. It's a little bit weird, the whole thing. So anyway, right, it's good reason to go get your own lulav and etrog. So anyway, he goes and he gives him he says, I'm not giving it to you for that reason. So when the rabbis saw this, they basically said, if you're not giving a gift to someone to the extent that they can actually sanctify it and it would be legit, then that's not really like you're giving it to him. Or giving it to her. So now they say, okay, if that's the case, comes Rabbi Yosi and he says, this isn't the same because he wasn't giving it to the person as gift. That wouldn't be allowed in this case. But he's making it ownerless when it's just the two of them. And it's clear that he's making it ownerless just so that the friend can eat, even though the person already said, you cannot benefit from me. So basically they said, this sounds a lot like that case, and we're going to make it xera so that people don't come to do other things like this. This sounds fishy, basically, and it's not really so legit. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, going back to the Mishna now. So let me review the first case in the Mishna. It says, my wife is not, right, I'm making a neder that she cannot benefit from me. So ad shloshim yom, according to Tanakama, if it's until 30 days, which we're going to define in two different ways in a minute, yami pernas. He can set up someone else to feed her. Any more than that, he has to give her a ketuba. Rabbi Yehuda comes and says, if it's a Yisrael, chodesh yamin. Okay, I'm sorry. Chodesh echad yikayim. If it's she's married to a regular Yisrael, 1 month. Now, 1 month and 30 days is really one and the same, right? And that's going to be the Gemara's question. Then continues Rabbi Yehuda and he says, but if it's a Kohen, right? And then obviously 2, no. If it's a Kohen, he gets 2 months because again, we're assuming this is all just said out of anger. We want to give them time to feel bad about it, change their mind possibly. If it's a regular Israel, worst case, he divorces her and he can always remarry her, but a Kohen can't do that, so we give him more time. To which the Gemara says, okay, so the first part of Rabbi Yehuda, Chodesh Echad, is the exact same thing. Now, notice it's a different language, right? In fact, when I read the Mishnah the first time, I noticed it was a different language. It's a little bit weird, and the Gemara jumps on that and says, one says 30 days, one says Chodesh. Why do they use different languages? So first the Gemara says, it sounds like they're really saying one and the same thing, because a month is 30 days usually. So Amar Abaye, really Rabbi Yehuda doesn't disagree about the first part. If it's Israel, it's all the same. Chodesh L'Shim Yom, that means the same thing. He was only introducing that to get to the case of the Kohen, which is 2 months. And that's why he changed the language, because he wanted to talk about 1 month, 2 months, 2 months, 3 months. Already then it doesn't make sense to start saying 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. About 1 month, 30 days is reasonable. Rava Amar Chodesh Maleh v'Chodesh Chaser Ikabenai, right? We know there's 29-day months in the Jewish calendar and there's 30-day months. So 30 days means 30 days exactly. A month means depends on the month. It could be 29, it could be 30, and it goes by the month. We've seen this with Shana also. Does Shana mean a year, or does it mean a calendar year? Let's say there's a leap year. It could be 13 months and not 12 months. Amala. Here comes now the 2 ways to read this Mishnah of Ad Shloshim Yom. Okay? It's a great example of if you have punctuation, it might make things different. Amara, lo shanu ela b'mifaresh. When the Tanna Kama said, if you're Madirat Ishtomi La'anot Ad Shloshim Yom, you read it like this. If you made a vow that your wife can't benefit from you for 30 days, comma, Yamid Parnas, then you can put up a Parnas. But aval bistam, but if you just said, I'm taking a vow that my wife not benefit from me, or I'm vowing for her that she not benefit from me, then yotzila alter v'yitin ketuba. He has to immediately give her ketuba. If he didn't specify a time, then that's basically torturing her, right? That she thinks she's going to be forever forbidden. Then you have to give a divorce right away. Shmuel Amal, and this is, by the way, the same achloka we saw by them on Daf Samach Aleph Amud Bet when it came to Hadarami Tashmisha Mita. Same idea here. So Shmuel said, Afilu b'stam, I like your comment, Medina, commas save lives, right? This is a good example, really, saves a marriage. Shmuel Amar, Afilu b'stam lo yotzi. Even if he just said, you cannot benefit from me, and didn't give any amount, Shema yimtza petach l'nidro. What we do is, the 30 days is a 30-day grace period. So we read it like this. Hamadirat ishtomi la'anot lo, comma, okay, if she was forbidden to benefit from him with this vow, Ad shloshim yom yami pranas. The first 30 days after having made this vow, we let him have the opportunity to change his mind, because we assume this was all done in a moment of anger. And we all know that in a moment of anger, we often regret it. We give him a 30-day grace period. So, but, right? And therefore, it's not if he said until 30 days. It's not, right? Quotation marks would have helped here also, because if it was quotes around Ad shloshim yom, it would mean he said it, Ad shloshim yom. And that would be rough. So now the Gemara says, if the gubei chadazingna, they already have the same argument somewhere else. And then the question is going to be, why did you need to mention the same argument in both places? Ditznan, hamadichat ishtomi tashmisha mita. He vows to forbid her from benefiting from him from having relations. Beit Shammai omrim shtei shamatot, Beit Hillel omrim shabbat achad. Beit Shammai says 2 weeks, Beit Hillel says 1 week, right? There, the reasons are different, right? Here there's a parnas, and that's why for 30 days, there, it's in terms of the expectations of how often they need to have relations. Va'amarav, and there Rav said, machloket b'mifaresh. The machloket is, if he said a week, or if he said 2 weeks, right? Then they debate this issue. Aval b'stam, but if he didn't give any amount, and just said forever almost, right? Sounds like forever. Yotzila alter v'yitin ketuba, he has to divorce her immediately. Ushmuel amar afilu b'stam nami liotzi, shema yimtza petach l'nidro. Shmuel again said, no. Doesn't matter if he didn't give an amount. The idea is, how long on the calendar do we wait? Do we wait a week or do we wait 2 weeks? That's the debate. How much time do we give him to decide to change his mind? And again, the amount is different, because there it's right here it's 30 days, there it's a month, there it's a week or 2. That's because, again, there he has a solution. Here he doesn't have a solution of someone to give her to have relations with. That's obviously not an option. So there we're going to limit it. Right, but still we're going to give him some sort of grace period. So it's the same idea. So now the Gemara says, why do we need both? If you only had the other case, you would say, now this difference I mentioned actually has more ramifications. There, Rav was very strict and said he's got to divorce her immediately. Okay, right? In other words, again, Rav says, because mishum delo efshar b'parnas, there he has to divorce her because there's no option for a parnas. Aval beha de efshar b'parnas ema modele l'shmuel. But maybe here, since he has an opportunity to, basically all he has to do is give her food, and he can make someone else in charge of giving her food. So once he can do that, maybe there's an opportunity to give him a grace period. In the case of relations where there's no alternative, well, maybe there's no grace period permitted. But here he has an alternative, and therefore maybe Rav would agree that he gets a grace period. V'it mar baha, and now the same logic, but the reverse. If you only had our case, you would say, baha kamar Shmuel. Shmuel gives a grace period here specifically for the same reason. Mishum de efshar b'parnas, because there's an opportunity to give her the mizonot in a different way. Aval bahahi, but in the case of Samach Aleph, with relations, maybe he would agree with Rabbi. He gives her a ketuba right away because it's not something he has some sort of solution in the interim for. And therefore, maybe he would really need to divorce her right away. Therefore, it's tzricha. That's why you needed to know that they have this debate in both cases, because you wouldn't have necessarily been able to infer that without the Gemara telling you. So now we go to the next case in the Mishnah, which was a very strange case. He forbids her to not eat any type of apple, let's say. Okay, so this is what we call inoi nefesh. This is torture. If you tell me, right, I have a daughter, if you told her she'll never eat apples again, right, she'll be tortured. She eats them every single day. That is her life. Okay, so if you were to forbid someone who that's what they like to eat, right, then that would be really torturous. So if you make this kind of a neder, you have to divorce her right away and give her the ketuba. What we're going to do with this Mishnah now is raise a question on Shmuel. Okay, so this is all going to be on the basis of how we just explained the Mishnah relating to Shmuel. Why? Now, if you notice, the question is, let's just go back to the Mishnah, because you have to really understand the Mishnah well to understand, not understand the content yet, but understand the structure. First case in the Mishnah was general hana'ah, she can't benefit from him. So we have this 30 days, which again, we just define differently. Either he said until 30 days, or we give him anyway 30 days. Then we have a case where she can't eat anything from all the perot. Yotzidi ten ketuba, according to Tanakama, Rabbi Yehuda gives him a day. Okay, according to Tanakama, he gets nothing. Okay, so right now we're going to focus on what's the difference between case one and case two. Why in case one does he get a month, and case two he doesn't get anything? So in the end, we're going to see that no matter how we explain this, it's not anything substantive between the content of hana'ah, general hana'ah, or fruit, one particular type of fruit. That's not really the difference between case one and case two. It's the details of the case itself. So if you're Rav, okay, so if we're going to say like this, Bishlam al Rav makes a lot of sense according to Rav, because Rav, we can make an easy distinction. Notice what didn't appear in case two, the words ad shloshim yom. So therefore, case one is b'mefaresh, case two is b'stam kam b'mefaresh. Case two is he didn't give a set amount of time. Remember what Rav says in that case? If you don't give a set amount of time, he has to divorce her right away. That's what case two is all about. Case one is when he specified until 30 days, and that's why Rav says he doesn't have to give her the ketuba right away. Elul Shmuel, but Shmuel, who basically says stam and mefaresh, there's no difference. Kasha, how are you going to explain the difference between case one and case two? If Shmuel thinks you get a 30-day grace period, why wouldn't you get a 30-day grace period when you said about fruits? Right? And this is back to what is this case talking about? To which the Gemara has to explain this case differently than we thought. And again, this is only according to Shmuel, you have to. But again, I want to point out, according to Rav, it also wasn't any substantive difference between fruits and general hana'ah. It's just that one you said ad shloshim yom and the other one you didn't say ad shloshim yom. Right? Both of these explanations are going to make the simple reading of the Mishnah very difficult, because if that's what the Mishnah wanted to distinguish, it should have said ad shloshim yom and not ad shloshim yom, right? It would have been a much better, they're changing too many things for that to really be a good interpretation. But anyway, they're satisfied with that, other than for Shmuel, which makes no sense. Why not get a 30-day grace period also here? So, hacha b'mayaskina, kigon shenedra v'kiyem la'ihu. She took the neder. If you remember now, a husband can annul the vows of his wife. So if she took a neder and kiyem la'ihu, he ratified the neder, kasaval Rabbi Meir, hu noten etzba ben shina. Okay, two things here. Number one, who's Rabbi Meir? Where does he come in? Okay, so there's a rule that a stam Mishna, a Mishnah that's unattributed without a name, we assume is Rabbi Meir. So here, the stam Tanakama is Rabbi Meir. That's what we're assuming right now. I say this very carefully because soon we might reject that. But right now, we're going to assume whoever appears here unattributed without a name is Rabbi Meir. That's a general principle in Mishna. The second thing is to say, what happened here was, so first of all, it's Rabbi Meir. What happened here was she took the vow, not him. No, she took the vow, not him. Why did she take the vow? So this is a little complicated, I thought, to understand, but I'll explain it the way I understand it. Why would she vow such a thing? Well, she wants to, as I say, trip him up. What does she want? She wants to get divorced. She can't get divorced because she can't initiate the divorce. So what does she do? She takes a vow that she knows that if he ratifies the vow and allows it to stand, he won't be able to stay married to her because that's basically torturing her. So if he ratifies this vow that she takes, he'll have to end up divorcing her. So she does it with the hope that he'll divorce her. Now, the assumption here is she's not going to change her mind about that, right? If he forbade her something because he was angry with her, the hope is he'll change his mind. We give him the 30-day grace period. Here, she took the vow herself, on herself. There's no anger at herself that we think she'll change her mind. That's not the situation. And again, as the commentaries claim, she's looking for divorce. So that's what she wants in the end. So she's not going to change her mind about that. And therefore, the assumption is, right, that's what she's trying to do. So now what happens? Rabbi Meir must hold. Now here, this is where you say it takes two to tango. Who's responsible for this vow? If this is a vow that basically breaks a marriage because either if he ratifies it and he's responsible, then he's basically creating a situation where they can't live together because he's enabled her to basically be tortured. So that's not a good situation. So he doesn't annul the vow. If he ratifies it, then according to Rabbi Meir, he's responsible for the fact that she has this vow, and therefore he has to divorce her and give her the ketuba money. Okay, that's what we're going to assume. You have to remember, in any Mishna where it says Yetetzeh, right, and that he has to divorce her, and he gives her the ketuba, that means it's his fault. In the cases we're going to see coming up, where he doesn't need to give her the ketuba money, it's cases where it's her fault. So right now, he says Rabbi Meir must hold then, if he's responsible here, that hu noten etzba ben shina, by him ratifying this vow. Okay, let's think about it this way. She did something not so good by taking this vow, but he ratified it. If he hadn't ratified it, it wouldn't be a vow at all. So that makes him more responsible than her. Now, obviously, one could argue both sides, and we're going to argue both sides. But hu noten etzba ben shina can be understood in two ways. He puts her finger in between her teeth and makes her bite it, basically, meaning it's his fault. Or maybe it's he puts his finger between her teeth and she bites his finger. Because in the end, he's the one who's getting bitten here because he has to divorce her and give her the ketuba money. So either which way, the simple understanding is basically what you really have to get here is she took the vow, he ratified it, and Rabbi Meir obviously holds him responsible for ratifying it, and therefore he has to divorce her and give her the ketuba money. To which the Gemara says, wait a minute. That would mean, okay, in simple terms, Rabbi Meir holds him responsible anytime he ratifies a vow of a woman's. That would be, right, a problematic vow. Well, V'savar Rabbi Meir, hu noten etzba ben shina, does he really hold that way? We have a braita that's going to say not. V'hatanya, haishash nedra b'nazir. A woman takes a vow to be a nazir. V'shama ba'ala v'lo efer la. He hears and doesn't annul it. Rabbi Meir v'Rabbi Yehuda omrim, ki natna etzba ben shina. She brought this upon herself. Lefichach, therefore, im ratza ba'ala fer yafeh. First of all, if the husband doesn't like that she took a neder, there's this concept that husbands don't like wives who take a lot of nedarim on themselves. It's not pleasant to live with someone who's constantly forbidding themselves things, right? So, I mean, whatever. I'm trying to think of, people who diet crazy, right? And then like all the food in the house is just this way, and you can't, the difference between diet, but being maybe a fanatic dieter, right? And you won't allow anything in your house of anything, and then again, you might not call this fanatic, but I'm just kind of saying in extreme terms. And then, whoever's living with her, it's kind of unpleasant, right? So there's this concept that you can divorce a woman who's a nadranit, who takes a lot of vows. It's just not pleasant to be married to her. So if he says, now this is Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. What are they saying? If he doesn't annul the vow, meaning, right, who's at fault? Well, we're going to see she's at fault because he can divorce her for having taken this neder and now being what we call an isha nadranit. And he doesn't have to give her the ketuba money because he could say, I didn't know you were going to be this woman who just makes vows all the time. Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Elazar, no, it's his fault because he didn't annul the vow. He can annul it, but if he didn't and said, I can't live with a woman who's a nadranit, He divorces her, but he has to give her the ketuba money because it's his fault. So any case, the main point you see here that's important right now, although the whole thing's going to be important in a minute, is that Rabbi Meir holds it's her fault. So you can't say Rabbi Meir in our Mishnah. In other words, again, in order to explain Shmuel, I'm going to keep reminding you where we're at. In order to explain Shmuel, we had to say that the Mishnah was referring to a case where she took an eder and he, even though it doesn't sound like the simple reading, he ratified it. And then the Tanakama, who must be Rabbi Meir, holds it's his fault, holds him responsible because you see that he has to give her the ketuba money when he divorces her. And that disagrees with Rabbi Meir. That contradicts Rabbi Meir in this breita, to which the Gemara says, Ipuch. Okay, easy answer. Switch the shitot. The transmission of this breita was a mistake, and it should be Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Omlin, hu notain, which would then match our Mishnah, and Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Elazar, mim hinatzna. Again, our Mishnah according to the way we just interpreted it. Well, that sounds very nice, but all these changes we're going to make a number of changes to this breita, are all going to have to stand the test of other breita. So now they're going to say, wait a minute. According to this, you're now going to say that Rabbi Yosi holds, but Rabbi Yosi hinatna. Rabbi Yosi now, according to our switch, holds her responsible. Well, that's going to contradict our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah say? V'hatznan, Rabbi Yosi Omer. Okay, I want to already show you from the beginning. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Meir all appear in our Mishnah, and we're going to basically, every time we change something, we're going to have to fix it, adapt it to what our Mishnah says. So in our Mishnah, it says, Rabbi Yosi Omer, ba'aniyot shalonas hankitzpa. If the woman, now again, we're going to assume, if the second case is a woman taking the neder, the third case too, if she says, I vow, I'm not going to adorn myself, we'll talk about later what that means, and he ratifies it, what did we say? Rabbi Yosi had this disagreement with the Tanakama, but they all agree that at a certain point he's responsible. So Rabbi Yosi said, if they're poor, even if only if he didn't give an end date, will he be responsible. But if he didn't give an end date, he is responsible. He has to be Yotzi v'ten ketuba. Now, why is he responsible? If she took the neder, if Rabbi Yosi holds, the woman's responsible and not the man. So that's a problem. Ema, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yosi. Okay, so first we had Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda versus Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Elazar. And we didn't like who said what, so we flipped it. Now we're going to not only flip who says what, we're going to put Rabbi Yosi over there and put Rabbi Yehuda over there. Rabbi Yehuda is going to go with Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yosi is going to go with Rabbi Meir. And now Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Meir both hold hu notain, and the other two hold he. It's her fault. Well, that doesn't make so much sense either. Okay, so here, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yosi, hu notain, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar, hinat. But Savar Rabbi Yehuda, hinat's not what you're going to say. Rabbi Yehuda holds hinat's not. That also doesn't match our Mishnah. Because remember, everyone in the Mishnah in the end holds the man accountable at some point, right? Depending on the details. But right, remember, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yisrael, Yom Echad Yikayim. Right? In our case, what did Rabbi Yehuda say? If she's married to a Yisrael, one day he can stay married to her, but after that he has to divorce her and give her a ketuba. Well, that was a case we just said where he ratifies her vow. So Rabbi Yehuda clearly also holds him responsible. So now we really have a problem. To which the Gemara says, okay, once we're editing it, let's edit it even more. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosi, we're going to do 3 against 1, because these 3 we've already proven from our Mishnah all hold he's responsible. So you can see how ridiculous this is getting at a certain point, right? Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosi, Omrim hu noten. Rabbi Elazar is on the other side by himself and says he noten. To which the Gemara says, well, if you think this has gone too far, if you want to keep it as pairs, right? And then say, okay, we can change who's in what pair. First of all, you can imagine people are transmitting things orally. It could get a little confusing. Who goes with who? Who said what? Who said what is easy to flip by accident. Who goes with who? A little less so, but okay. But to start switching 3 against 1 and 2 against 2 from 2 against 2, that already is much, too far. Well, we have a different answer. And this I alluded to in the very beginning. Say that Rabbi Meir is on the side of Rabbi Elazar, that it's her fault. Now, what was the problem? We said our Mishnah is Tanakama, and Tanakama must be Rabbi Meir. Maybe that's not true. Rabbi Meir. Maybe in this case, the stam opinion is not Rabbi Meir. We've seen it many times, by the way, where there's a stam opinion, and they say, who is that? And they come up with who it is, and they find a source somewhere else that shows that's the person who holds this. It's not always Rabbi Meir. So we can say that general principle, this is an exception to the rule. And then you don't have to worry about Rabbi Meir. You still have to switch around names, because you have to put Rabbi Yosi with Rabbi Yehuda rather than Rabbi Meir with Rabbi Yehuda. And then you have to say who says what, but at least it's less editing. Now going back to Rabbi Yosi. The Sama Rabbi Yosi, Baniyot Shalonatan Kitzba. We're now going to go to the third case. The third case is, again, assuming we're going with Shmuel's explanation, the woman takes a vow that she's not going to adorn herself. The husband ratifies it. And then Rabbi Yosi said, if they're poor, then only if he didn't give any end date. If they're wealthy, 30 days. And Tanakama said he has to divorce her immediately, right? Tanakama had said, right, Yotzi v'yitein ketuba right away. So, v'savar Rabbi Yosi, baniyot shalonatan kitzba, alma bal matzeh mefer. Again, what does it seem to imply here? Now, this is a different inference. It's clear, according to the way we just explained, according to Shmuel, that these two later cases are cases where she made a vow and he ratified it and didn't annul it. And that's why he's responsible. That assumes he can annul this kind of vow. And according to Rabbi Yosi, also, Rabbi Yosi thinks he can annul this kind of vow. Well, we're going to see, Uraminu, this contradicts Rabbi Yosi. Elu dvarim shabal mefer, dvarim sheyesh behem inoi nefesh. So the Tanakama in this Braita said, these are things that a husband can be mefer. Actually, I didn't check what kind of source it is. Assume it's a Braita. These are things a husband can annul. Dvarim sheyesh behem inoi nefesh, things that are afflictions to the woman. And what do we define as afflictions? If I take a shower, I don't take a shower. If I don't know if it wasn't exactly showers in those days, but if I wash myself or not, if I adorn myself, which they assume right now means like perfume, okay? Perfume on your body, some sort of deodorant. I'm Rabbi Yosi, but Rabbi Yosi disagrees here and says, Ein elu nidrei inoi nefesh. That's not affliction. I'll tell you what is considered affliction. People can go without showering. People can go without adorning themselves. You can't go without eating meat. Okay, all you vegetarians, vegans out there, I don't know. But in those days, I guess that was much less common. If you say, I won't eat meat, okay, these are basic food needs. Okay, also there's lots of people who don't drink wine. But again, in those days, that was the basic drink. This one's really interesting. If you didn't think the other two were interesting, shelo et kashet, turning out I'm a bet. Big dates tzivoniyim. I won't wear colored clothes. That can't live with. Interesting, right? Some people wear only black, I don't know. But in those days, it seemed like people wore colored garments. So if any of those things, I wonder if this has any connection, by the way. A woman, when she's in nida, is supposed to wear white, and when she's not in nida, she's supposed to wear colored clothes, and maybe that's why, because it was just basically what they wore. Maybe it means only white versus something else. Maybe that's, anyway, interesting. So to which they answer, and therefore what's not on this list? Shalot kashet. So that means it's not in the realm of things that he's allowed to annul. He can't just annul any vow a wife makes. There's limitations on it. It's affliction, and now we're going to see it's also dvarim shebeino lebeina. Okay, if it's things that have to do with their intimate relationship. So to which the Gemara answers, so it's not affliction, but it must be that this kishut that we were referring to has to do with things that have to do with their relationship, okay? Their intimate relationship. So Rashi explains what it means is, basically it's a neder that she not do any hair removal of her pubic hairs, and that was an issue for their intimate relationship. Some people say the Ritva explains it much more generally, which is that she won't adorn herself in ways that will make her attractive to him, and that will affect their relationship. So to which the Gemara says, and this is, you have to understand this a little bit, not kipshuto, okay, because it sounds like it's saying something, but it's really not saying that. And you'll see by the end that it's clear they're not saying that. The literal translation sounds like that only works if you hold that the husband can annul vows that have to do with him and her. But that's not what it says. That's not what it means, because everybody thinks he can annul vows that have to do with him and her. The question here seems to be, even though the wording doesn't match it exactly, but it's clear that's what the Gemara is saying. This makes sense if you think that, okay, whether you go with Rashi, hair removal, or you go with Ritva, general adorning herself, let's say if it's perfume or something, has to do with Beino Lebeina, falls into that category, okay? So there's a debate about whether or not it falls in the category. So if you say these do fall in the category, then it makes sense. You could say that's why Rabbi Yosi thinks that this is reason for divorce, because he's basically ratified her vow, which is something he can ratify, because this has to do with him and her. affects their relationship. Ela lamanda amar ein habal meifel. But if you hold that this doesn't come into that category of beino lebeina, which we'll see in a minute why you would hold that way, ma'i kalamemer. How can you explain this then? As you can't say the husband's responsible for ratifying her vow when he didn't even have the power to annul her vow. Now, how do we know that there's this machloket? So, and this is where you're going to see why I'm right, why the explanation I'm bringing seems to be the right explanation. To itmar, as it is said, things between husband and wife, Rav Huna says you can be made fair, which again doesn't mean everyone says things between husband and wife. What he means is these things that we're discussing, whatever they might be, Rashi or Ritva, let's say, right, whatever things they are, he can be made fair. He can't annul those vows. Why? It's a very strange image, but metaphor. We never saw, you don't see a fox that dies in his foxhole, right? That's his safe space, okay? A husband with his wife, if she's not adorned and decked out beautifully, he's not going to have an issue with that. That doesn't affect, right? So whether it's removing her pubic hairs doesn't affect him in any way, or right, if she doesn't, or if it's perfume or whatever it might be of adorning herself, that's not going to affect their relationship. In the end, right, he's got a comfort level with her that she doesn't need to do that, okay, which makes a lot of sense. So in any case, according to this interpretation, we're going to have an issue, because then you can't say that that's what the Mishna is referring to, because again, if you're assuming, you have to assume, go away from the pshat of the Mishnah in order to explain Shmuel. We have to keep going back. In order to explain Shmuel, what did we say? The Mishnah's, what's the difference between case 1 and case 2 and 3, where case 2 and 3 is immediate divorce, because he ratified the vow, and she was the one who made the vow. Because she made the vow, there's no grace period, because it's not the issue here. It's not that he got angry at her. Once you say that, it has to be a type of vow that could be annulled by him, and therefore he's responsible for ratifying it. But if it's not, then we have an issue. So therefore, in order to explain it according to Shmuel, according to this explanation that holds that adorning herself is not part of things that are beino lebeina, you would have to explain it again according to Rabbi Yosi, who doesn't hold affliction of the nefesh either. Then you'd have to also wear like within Rabbi Yosi, within those who say not, and that was all within Shmuel. You now have to reinterpret the Mishnah again, only according to certain schools of thought. The ones who write according to it's Rav Huna, Rav Ava, according to Rabbi Yosi, according to Shmuel, you would have to say the vow went like this. Okay, well, we'll see in a minute. She depended it on relations with her husband. And then it becomes an obvious beino lebeina. Let's see what this means. She says, having pleasure from relations with you is forbidden to me. She's forbidding herself to have pleasure from relations with her husband. Im et kashet. If I adorn myself, meaning, right, I can have relations with you anytime I want, but if I adorn myself, then I'll be forbidding myself from having relations. That makes it a neder, and then he ratified it, and then he'd have to divorce her immediately, because that's a neder that's beino lebeina, which means he could have annulled it. He didn't, because he didn't. Now there's this forbidden tashmish between them. Now, of course, she could just not adorn herself. We'll get to that. The Gemara is going to ask that. Why does it just not adorn herself, and then she won't be forbidden? But we're going to see why this is still going to be forbidden for them to live as husband and wife together. Now, why does this language work? We're now going to see the Amar Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana distinguished between two types of languages she could say relating to this issue of forbidding tashmish. And one works and one doesn't work. One is actually an invalid vow altogether. This one is a good vow, and we'll see why in a minute. As Rav Kahana said, the Amar Rav Kahana, hana'at tashmishi alecha. If she forbids hana'ah from tashmish with her on him, she can't do that. Kofel mishamashto. If she says, you can't benefit from having relations with me, she's not allowed to do that, because part of her rights as a wife, just like he has rights to give her onah and have relations at specified times or however we define it, or when she wants, she also has a commitment to have relations with him. She forbids relations with her to him. She can't do that. But if she puts the tashmish, the forbidden tashmish, on herself, anyone can forbid anything to themselves. She doesn't have a commitment to herself about that. So that, yafer, he should annul. Okay. Lefi, now why should he annul it? Because if he doesn't annul it, they'll have to get divorced. Why? Lefi she'ein machilim la'adam davar hasur lo. Even though she's forbidding it to herself, well, there's two people in this act, and therefore, if he has relations with her, he'll be causing her to do something that's forbidden to her. It's not forbidden to him, but a person can't do something to someone else when he knows that it's forbidden to that person. So therefore, they're going to end up not being able to have tashmish for, right? He won't be able to have relations with her because of what she did. Now it forbids it, right? But it's not direct to him. So the vow is a good vow because yes, as we say, yesh makom lachul, it can actually apply. It's just that technically speaking, he's not going to be able to have relations with her, and that creates a relationship that can't stand, and therefore he'll have to divorce her. So to which the Gemara asks, so again, that was all just to prove that this type of vow could work. If words it in this particular way, it would work. And then if it works, that must be the vow they're talking about. And then he would have to divorce her because they can't stay married. And it was his fault because he ratified it. He should have annulled it. And again, that's according to, assuming you say he's at fault. Now the Gemara asks the question I mentioned before. It's not like she's forbidden to have relations with him only if she adorns herself, to which the Gemara says, in Ken Karulam Nuvel. There's no such woman who won't ever adorn herself because people will call her, oh, that ugly woman, or however you would call it. Women don't like to be looked at in that kind of way. Okay, well, what about this option? She could put adorn herself, then she'll be forbidden. But remember, there's a certain time frame. They could live for at least 2 weeks or 1 week, depending on who you hold by. So why did the Mishna say immediately? It should say a week or 2 weeks. Right, again, going back to this is all according to Shmuel, there should be a grace period. Again, we go back to this distinction. When he makes the neder, he gets a grace period. Desadra, because we assume he must have gotten angry at her. And hopefully in a week or two, right, he'll calm down and he'll annul his, right, he'll undo his vow. But avalhacha, dinadra iu v'shatikla. Here, now, again, this gets into the mindset of a woman. Why would she do a neder like this? Obviously, she's very upset with her husband, right? And when you're upset, what do, right? You say these radical things. And what's the expectation? And often this is a woman's expectation. You want the husband to come over, put his arm around you and say, no, it's okay. We'll work things out, right? But instead of doing that, what did he do? Vishatikla. He was just silent, like he didn't care that she was suffering. So Sabra, she says to herself, she understands his silence as what? Misnehu desanele, he must hate me. And he must be thrilled that now I've given him reason to divorce me. And she realizes, right, this is done. And therefore, there's no grace period of changing minds or anything. This is not the kind of situation that would lead to that. It's just a situation that's clearly, right, this is the end game. Okay. Rabbi Yosi Omer, ba'aniyot shelo natan kitzba. So now going to this last line in the Mishnah, if it's poor people, it's only if he gives no time frame. So now the question is, well, what kind of time frame does he need to give in order for us to say that he doesn't have to divorce her? The kama kitzba, amar Rabbi Yehuda, amar Shmuel, yubech chodesh. Some question is, how long can a poor woman go without adorning herself? So the first opinion says 12 months. Rabba bar Chana amar Rabbi Yochanan, 10 shanim, 10 years. Okay, he says they can go for a really long time. Rav Chisda amar Rav Imi, regel, a holiday till the next holiday. Shekem b'nai Yisrael mit kashtot beregel. If he does it any longer than till the next holiday, because they would adorn themselves on the holiday season, and therefore would have to be only till the next holiday. If it's already past the next holiday, then he has to divorce her right away. She can't stand, she can't manage that. Uba ashirot 30 yom. Mishna 30 yom. Why 30 days for wealthy people? Amar Abaye sheken isha chashuva nehenek mireach geshutah 30 yom. Her thing can last for 30 days. First of all, if we're talking about Rashi, there was a depilatory cream. That makes a lot of sense that it would last for 30 days. If it's perfume, hard to say that they would do something that could actually last for 30 days, but maybe, right? Maybe they were less careful than we are nowadays. Not sure exactly what this would mean and what would last for 30 days, but you get a little bit of insight into the lives of the wealthy, of the poor through this sugya. Okay, moving on. Now we get to another interesting sugya connected here. In his vow, he forbids his wife to go back to her parents' house. Bisman shui ma be'ir. Now, how often do you visit your parents? It depends on how close you live to them, possibly, or maybe not. But if the parents live in the city, then the assumption is she visits them often. And therefore, basically a month, yes, but more than a month, no. We got to assume if they're living in the same city, she's going to have to go more often than 2 months, and therefore he'll have to divorce her immediately. If he lives in a different city, now, when does she visit the family who lives far away? On the holidays. So if he says for one holiday, that we can handle. But now here it gets tricky. But 3 holidays, no. What about 2? Right? We're going to obviously say from the first line, it sounds like 1, but not 2. From the second line, it sounds like 3, but 2 would be okay. So contradiction, we'll have to deal with that. These were places women generally went. The Rama talks about this, right? That women shouldn't go out very often, only once or twice a month to a beit avel, a beit mishteh. Those are the main places the women frequented, which is go to a house of mourning or a celebration. So Yotzivi ten ketuba because mipnei sheno el b'faneh, because he's basically not allowing her to be a free woman, right? This is things that women do. If it was that he didn't like the people at that party, let's say, and he was worried things might happen, then rashai. In that case, we allow him. Okay, if it was a place that wasn't appropriate for her to go, in his mind anyway. Amarla, this is very unclear, this rest of this Mishna. We'll have to explain this later when we get to the Gemara, not today. Amarla, masha amartli. I insist that you tell so-and-so something you told me, which would probably be an embarrassing thing for her. Oh, masha amarti lach, or something I told you, you should tell someone else, also might be something embarrassing. Oh, or fill up or dump into the garbage. Yotzivi ten ketuba. So then also, okay, if he forces her to do something that's humiliating to her, also he'd have to give her a ketuba. Okay, again, looking at this from a bird's eye perspective, it's all about having the husband understand that he can't just, right? A woman has her own rights. And even though in Judaism back then and in all of really societies back then, women did have less rights than the husbands, but they're saying the husband doesn't have what we call ba'alut aleha. In fact, we're going to see the word ba'al coming up in a negative context in a few minutes, which is, right, he doesn't have rights to everything. She has certain freedoms that he can't basically, suffocate her. So the Gemara says, Hagu fakashya. Something doesn't make sense. Amart regal echad yikayem hashnayim yotzivi ten ketuba. Right? You said 1 regal, yes. Sounds like 2, no. But then you said shlosha yotzivi ten ketuba, which sounded like only 3 he would have to give her ketuba, but 2 would be okay. Hashnayim yikayem. So Amar Abaye seifa atan lekohen. Abaye says we're talking about 2 different cases. The first one, 1 but not 2, is a regular woman who's married to a regular person, non-Kohen. The second line, 3, he gives her a ketuba, that's a Kohen, and that matches Rabbi Yehuda. And this is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. It just doesn't say it's Rabbi Yehuda, and it didn't say we were talking about 2 different cases, but that must be what it means. Rabbi Bar Ula gives a different explanation. This is also very interesting. Lokasha kamba ridufa kamba she'ena v'dufa. Depends on the type of relationship she has with her parents. Yes, we distinguish the geography, but there's more than just geography about how often you visit your parents. It's a matter of, is she someone who loves to go back to her parents all the time, or is she someone who doesn't? Okay. Right. I was comparing notes with someone, and I won't say on what side I am here, but about our daughters just went away for Mechina, and one calls very often and one doesn't call very often, right? There's those who are like that and those who are like that. So as hayiti be'einav kimotzet shalom, we're now going to have drashot about this concept of a woman who's redufan. With that, we will finish. This is a pasuk from Shir Shirim, and it's darshan like this: Amar Rabbi Yochanan, kikala shenimtzet shlema bebeit chamia. What does it mean? She's like someone who finds peace. It's a woman who finds peace in her father-in-law's household. Now, you would think maybe there should be less likely to go home. No, it's the opposite. Right? When things are good often, you want to tell your parents how great things are going. So she's so happy in her father-in-law's house, right, meaning really her husband's house, that she goes to tell her parents. Another pasuk. Now we're moving to Hosea. Hosea has this whole image of the Jewish people being like a relationship between husband and wife. You're going to call me Ishi, my man, and not Ba'ali. Okay, Baal has connotation of, right? This is why many people nowadays like to use the word my Ish instead of my Baal, even though for years it was always Baal as husband in Hebrew. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, what does this mean? When she's already married, right? She's no longer embarrassed by him anymore. She no longer feels like he has ba'alut over her. It's the ishi. When she's still in her father's house, it's more intimidating, and therefore she feels more like it's ba'ali. Okay, that's not really connected to the Ridufa B'Beit Avia, but it does mention this difference between his house, her house, but it's more like where she is in the marriage. At least that's how Rashi understands it. Okay, we'll stop here for today. We'll start tomorrow with this Beit Mishteh and the Beit Avel, and maybe there's a distinction between the two cases. Okay, have a great day, everyone.